Thank you, Peg. Thank you, Erin, for inviting me here, and thank all of you for coming. And thank you, Iris, for arbor-glyph. Beautiful word.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring us back to Morocco after those beautiful poems, and I'm gonna tell you two stories, read you two stories. One of them short, and the other one's super short. And the first story, I just sort of want to tell, and then I'll read a bit. So, in 1993 and 1994, I set myself the goal of going around the world without taking any airplanes. And the trip would take 9 months and carry me through 27 countries. I wrote a book about it called The Size of the World, which is not here tonight. And on the third month of that trip, I found myself in Tangier, Morocco. And I'm an avid reader, and I'd seen The Sheltering Sky, and I was a huge fan of Paul Bowles. And my first thought in Tangier was, I've got to go visit Paul Bowles. How to find him? How to figure out where he lived? Well, what else? I went to the Morocco Tourist Bureau, and I went up to the guy behind the desk and I said, I'd like to go visit Paul Bowles. Can you, as if he was some sort of museum or crypt. And the guy behind the desk just shook his head and he said, I can't give you that information. And I said, why not? He said, Paul Bowles is a person. He lives in an apartment. He doesn't like people just dropping in on him. And I began to get it at this point. And I backed away from the desk, and I heard a voice behind me just saying, I can take you to Paul Bowles. I turned around, and there in this really bright jalaba with a fez on his hat was a man named Ahmed, who'd been a guide in Morocco for about 25 years. And I sidled up to him and said, I know where Paul Bowles lives. I can take you there in my taxi and drop you off. I can't make any guarantees beyond that. And so I got in the taxi with Ahmed, and he drove me through town to a sort of a little residential area of Tangier where there are many apartment buildings. And he dropped me off the sidewalk and he said, that's the building where Paul Bowles lives. And I said, okay, just wait for me. I knocked at the front door of the apartment. I went up, there was a guide lobby, and said Paul Bowles, room 33, and I went up to the third floor. And there was a brass plate on the front of the door that said Bowles. So I imagined I was in the right place. And I knocked on the door, and a caretaker answered the door. And he said yes, and I said, I would like to pay my respects to Paul Bowles. And he said, Paul Bowles has not been feeling well for many months. He's not seen visitors. So I'm afraid I'll have to turn you away. And I said, please, just 5 minutes with Paul Bowles. That's all I asked. And he looked at me and he said, I'll go ask Mr. Bowles if he'll see you for 5 minutes. He came back after about 30 seconds. He said, please come in. Bowles' apartment consists of 4 rooms. I entered through the front door, passing a small kitchen on my right, and traversed the living room, the largest room in the house, with dark curtains drawn. Half a dozen kilims covered the floor, and there was a low sofa. A coffee table sat in the center of the room, covered with art books. Against the left wall stood a bookshelf filled with editions and translations of works by both Paul and his wife Jane Bowles, who had died of cancer in 1973. Beside the bookshelf was a compact stereo with stacks of CDs piled to the ceiling from the floor around it. The far right corner of the living room ended in a square nook with 3 doors. The door to the left opened into Bowles' study. I couldn't resist peering inside. It was a veritable shrine to the printed word, with 3 walls hidden by sagging bookshelves. The 4th wall held a huge picture window which, facing east, admitted a broad panorama of the hills and illuminated buildings beyond his neighborhood. The central door led to the boudoir, lit by an incandescent table lamp. Every inch of the small bedroom was spoken for. Clothes were heaped on the bureau. 2 portable stereos and a collection of recordings, some by Bowles, sat below the shuttered window. Books littered the floor, sat in sliding piles beneath the dresser, edged off the table, infiltrated the chaos of the bureau, congregated under the bed. The author of The Sheltering Sky lay between black paisley sheets, propped on a pillow, wrapped in a pale brown felt robe. A bed table bridged his lap. Upon this rested his tea, a few gelatin capsules, a lighter, and a hand-painted cigarette case filled with Keef cigarettes. Keef, of course, is marijuana, and hashish. A circular table in the center of the room was loaded with bombs and medicines, an arsenal against the 83-year-old writer's plethora of ailments. Bowles lay in his bed, his physical frailty belied by his sharp gaze and immediate wit. I shook his hand. "I'm Paul Bowles," he informed me, so that there would be no confusion. My chair was on the other side of the table. Bowles, his books, and myself formed a constellation in the close atmosphere of the bedroom. I placed the lily I had brought on the table. A moment later, flustered, I stood up to shake his hand again. "You don't remember shaking my hand," he laughed, "because I only gave you one finger last time. This time I'll give you 3. Bowles looked at me and he said, "I hope you're not here to say hello to one of the great beat writers." And I said, "Paul, you never were a beat writer. You were always a literary writer. The beat writers were of a generation after you. You were more in the lines of Faulkner or Hemingway, this sort of writer." Clearly I'd said the right thing. He patted on the bed next to himself and he motioned for me to sit down. And I sat there and we began to talk, and Paul Bowles and I spoke for almost 4 hours. And he said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, I'm really not busy. And he said, come back tomorrow morning, we'll spend the day together. And in fact, it was the Jewish holiday of Pesach, the Passover. And I asked Bowles if he'd ever celebrated the Passover before. He said no, he hadn't. So I brought with me some matzahs, some honey, roasted egg, and a few of the items that you use on the Passover Seder. And he and I broke bread together, matzah, and we celebrated the Feast of Freedom together. But that first day was really the most extraordinary day because it was so unexpected to sit there on his bed with him, just speaking with him so easily. And when I left after 4 hours, I went back outside, and there was my cab sitting there. And I squeezed it to the back seat, and I said, "Well, that was amazing." And the taxi driver looked at me and said, "I hope it was," and he nodded to the front. Of course, he kept the meter running. Here's another little section from this book. The word fruit was inadequate to convey the richness of Marrakesh's urban arbors. It wasn't a question of a few stray loaves hanging over the clean sidewalks. Banquets of oranges weighted the limbs of the trees lining Avenue Mohammed V, fluorescent against red clay walls, ripening patiently against an animated backdrop of buses, taxis, and horse-drawn carts. Though the Medina was spectacular, it was not where I worshipped. Just to the west of the Jama el Fna, the inscrutably named Place of Nothing, where the clowns and storytellers and dentists perform, the city's orange sellers ply their trade. There are dozens of them, positioned behind broad wooden tables, sagging under the weight of their cargo. Millions of huge, sweet oranges, the pride of Morocco, rise in four-sided pyramids toward the sky, half obscuring the red-cheeked, thick-wristed men who split and pump them dry in tough chrome squeezers. For 2 dirhams, 18 cents, one is handed a tall, clean glass filled to the brim with fresh, cold orange juice so perfect and honest and sweet that you burst into tears drinking it. Here at last is the platonic ideal, and everything you've had before, everything else called orange juice, has been but a lame attempt to imitate it. Thank God for oranges, you cry, downing your first glass. Thank God for Morocco and the planet Earth. After 2 glasses, you're deliriously happy. After 6 glasses, you're whirling like a dervish, spinning wildly through the Jama el Fna, spinning in a beatific citric ecstasy, while blind Moroccan beggars toss coins into the empty glass, still clutched in your spinning hand. That's all I got. Thank you.